Welcome to the ninth edition of the Hirist Tech Talks. My name is Abhor, and I'm a part of the marketing function at Hirist.com. And I'm extremely delighted to have all of you join us today, right on time, guys, at 4 p.m. So some of you guys are here for our previous webinars. Some of you guys are coming here back, after all the editions of our previous, Hirist Tech Talks. And if you'd like to check out what you've missed, the people who've not got a chance to view them, I'll share their YouTube links in the chat box. Guys, today we have the pleasure of conducting the ninth edition of the series in collaboration with Framework Tech Media. So Mark Lessoff, who's the founder of Framework Tech Media, will be leading this session today. So guys, almost 2 million people have learned coding and design from Mark. Right? Mark and his company, Framework Tech Media, have taught people web and mobile development online in corporate classrooms, as well as in secondary schools across the country. So guys, Mark has also authored 8 books on programming, guys, and he was named 40 under 40 in both Austin as well as Hartford. Guys, Mark was also awarded the prestigious Learning Guild Master Award. So guys, he is the perfect person for you to ask any question when it comes to mobile development. Today, guys, he'll be sharing his thoughts on the topic building mobile apps with the Java stack and JavaScript stack. And, we're really excited for this. But before we start with the session, guys, there's a Q&A box on the right-hand side. So make sure that any questions that you have, you post in the Q&A box and not on the chat box on the left-hand side. The chat box on the left-hand side is disabled. We'll try to take as many questions as possible. And I think without any further ado, we should get right into the topic of discussion, guys. So over to you, Mark. Please take this forward.
Thanks, Vibor, and thank you for the invitation to join you guys today. I know it's where you guys are Friday afternoon, and I'm in Connecticut in the U.S., close to New York City, so it's 5:30 a.m. Friday morning here. And really excited about this session. I was thinking about what would be a good topic for this, and I thought it would be fun to go through an app that was written for mobile using the JavaScript stack. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I apologize. I only have one screen available to me today, so you're going to see some of the mess that I've got in my screen here, but I think we'll be able to get through it. So first off, there we go. 2 important URLs. I'll show this again at the end. The first, if you want the code for this app and you want to go through it yourself, it's right there. It's written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's not wrapped with any framework yet in order to distribute it as mobile. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And then I put together an instructional guide here that takes you through the app step by step and goes through all the code and shows you how to build it yourself. This is a great way for you to learn how to do the app. This is yours for the taking. Just go to the URL. The second one, social.frameworktv.com/BART. The first one, of course, being the GitHub here where I have all the code. You can grab both of these. I am going to, after this, though, disable the key that is used for the API. Obviously, it's my API account, so you can get your own BART Transit app API. If you just go to BART Transit app and search their API, you can get your own API key to make this work. So again, these are the 2 URLs. I'll go over those. And again, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I have been teaching online for about 20 years. My company is called frameworktv.com. I do run an online school where I teach people HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all the way through Node.js in a boot camp format to try and get them to their first job. If you look at our Framework magazine, we've got some really good articles for new developers. You also might want to follow me if you use Udemy. I've got dozens of courses on Udemy and over 500,000 students there. And the other place to find me is our YouTube channel, which is, if you go onto YouTube and search Framework Tech Media. Are you someone who's trying to learn to create websites? I put out new videos each week on all sorts of stuff. I'd love to have you subscribe to this channel. And the easiest way to get there, I'll just show you this real quick, and then we'll get to the good stuff. I'm looking in the wrong place. Let's see. There we go. Is this URL. I'll put this, actually, I meant to put this on the slide, but I'll put it up there so you guys can grab this later too. That's our YouTube. So this way you guys have a lot of ways to keep up with me and learn new stuff as we go. All right, so let's talk about the app. Now, unfortunately, if I run the app right now, here we go. And let me put it in mobile emulation mode. If we run the app right now, curiously, or perhaps not so curiously, the app doesn't yield a result from the API, and actually gives us an error that I hadn't anticipated. And the reason why is right now in San Francisco, it's 1:35 in the morning, and there are no trains running. So BART is the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. The Bay Area Rapid Transit System. It is a train transportation system for the people in San Francisco and Oakland, and takes them all over the city. The app that I'm going to be showing you is a project that uses the BART API and tells you what trains are coming to any individual station, how far they are away in time-wise, what platform they're coming on, and how long the train is in cars. So this is what it looks like when it is running. Unfortunately, again, there's no trains running in the system. I am running the app right now in a server. And you can see that server running right here. I'm just using Python simple server to run this application. All right, so I think what I want to do is actually go through the code for the app so you guys understand how this is put together. And I think it might be worthwhile just to talk a little bit about why would we develop apps for mobile using JavaScript and the JavaScript stack. And the reason I think it's important is we've increasingly had a divergent standard in tech where iPhone apps and Android apps, the two major platforms, require completely separate teams to maintain them. And if you're going to work in both platforms, you've also got to keep up in all of the changes in both platforms, which change fairly frequently. They're both on a frequent release schedule. So there's been an increasing movement to create and use more apps that are based on standards, and specifically the HTML standard that work for mobile. The way these apps work is more or less your mobile device displays an embedded browser window, and the app runs in that. And there are a number of platforms that you can use to take your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code and wrap that code in a wrapper that makes it run, and you can distribute just like a mobile app. You've probably heard of PhoneGap, and then also its non-proprietary brother library, which I'm not thinking of the name of, but I think it's worth looking up right now so you guys have it. And I just total PhoneGap library, just total brain fog early on a Friday morning. PhoneGap library. Oh, there we go, Cordova. So Apache Cordova is one of the libraries that's used pretty frequently to build cross-platform apps. It's a very stable library, very easy to use. It's got great command line tooling that allows you to very quickly build and release your app. All right, so let's go over the code. So for those of you who are web developers or familiar with web development, you'll notice in the head of my document, I've got a couple of style sheets attached, and these are to take advantage of two libraries. I'm taking advantage of the jQuery library and the jQuery mobile library. Now, by the way, I would never distribute a mobile app with these live links to the CDN for the actual library code. I would embed them in the actual app, but for the purposes of demo, which is all I built this app for, it's fine. So line 8, you may be familiar with the idea of responsive design. Responsive design is simply the idea that we want an app to work and look correct on different sized screens. And you may be more familiar with the idea of responsive design when it comes to website, but I'm applying it here to this mobile app so that whatever size screen users have, the mobile app displays it correctly. And the way we do that is we have a meta tag with the name of viewport, and we set the device width and the initial scale. Width equals device width simply means that the width of our viewport, which is another word for the screen, is going to be the device width. And our initial scale of 1 means it's going to be 100%. We're not going to have like a pinch gesture in order to reduce or increase the scale of the screen. I linked to my own CSS on line 9. I've got a couple of CSS rules that I've embedded here. One for the header and footer. If you look, the actual app has a header where it says BART train departures and a footer, 2020 framework television. So the first CSS rule applies to that, just centering the text, setting the height and width. On the footer, I wanted it fixed at the bottom of the screen. So I set up that CSS rule. A little bit of margin space, and set up a width and height of what I call the train box. The train box is quite simply this yellow box that indicates the line that the train is running on. The BART system has a number of lines: yellow, blue, green, red, etc. So that's simply setting up that box that you see. And then just a little margin space as well. Not a whole lot going on. Obviously, I depended mostly on the embedded styling in jQuery Mobile in order to style this application. jQuery Mobile does give your app a nice kind of, more of an app-like look than the look of, if you just do straight HTML, kind of looks more like a website. Next thing we included was the key. The key is quite simply a code that was assigned to me by the API to access the API. Almost all APIs do this now. And then we have a file called stations.js. Stations.js is a data file that they provided with the station abbreviation and name of each station in the system. Sorry, my mouse just failed, but luckily I have a backup here, I think. There we go, backup mouse. Let's see if this one works. All right, maybe I can do this way. Let's see. Can I get to the code here? There we go. All right, so this particular file has all of our station abbreviations and station names, just set up as a JSON file. And then so weird. Why isn't my mouse working? See if we can get that running again. My mouse is absolutely frozen in place, which is very strange. I apologize. I'm trying to get it going again here. Let's see if it's the Bluetooth. Perfect timing, right? These things always happen at weird times.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's see if we can see what's going on here. Yeah, it looks like my Bluetooth has failed. I'm trying to get one of the mice to come back alive here. Well, I apologize, Vibor. Why don't we see if there's any questions while I'm kind of trying to work this out, and I can answer them this way. Maybe we're not kind of wasting time as I try and figure out why none of my mice are working.
Okay, so I think we have one question right now, Mark. The question
Sure.
says, what are your views on droid script as a coding tool?
I actually don't have one. I've never used it. So, I mean, my big push has been to get away from the proprietary standards that require parallel development in a separate code base for iOS and Android. And increasingly in industry, each year we're seeing more and more people move away from traditional native development into hybrid development. Last year, about 20% of the apps, or 2 years ago, about 20% of the apps released were hybrid, and the next year, last year, it was 25. So the number is increasing, and I think companies are just not wanting to spend the time and money on hybrid native app development. So we're seeing more and more hybrid technologies. And those are the ones I'm most familiar with. So I apologize, I don't have a great answer for that question. I see a couple more questions may have appeared, and I'm having trouble as I continue to try and revive my mouse.
Okay, I'll just read out the next one. So this one looks interesting. I don't know. What do you think about the discontinuation of UI web view, and what are its implications on mobile first apps?
Read that one for me again.
What do you think about the discontinuation of UI web view, and what are its implications on mobile first apps?
Yeah, so obviously for people who advocate what I advocate for in hybrid apps, the discontinuation of UI WebView is disappointing, and it's a setback for JavaScript-based mobile apps. But I think the push for standards is so strong that over time, I really think we're going to see a solution here that allows something. And I understand, I mean, there's security implications for the way UI WebView has been used, but I think over time we're going to see it come back, honestly. There's been a big pushback, and I think it's problematic from a number of standpoints. Obviously, that move was disappointing for me with what I do, but hopefully over time we'll see it come back. If not, I mean, I think it's iOS development will continue to diverge from standards, and we'll still have a situation where development's going to have to be in parallel for iOS and Android because the market is still about 50-50. Hope I answered that.
Great. Okay, so I think this next question is by Shruti Pandey, and she's asking, what's your take on Flutter?
Love it. I think Flutter is a great app development technology. I think it's one that's here to stay. It's easy to learn. It's got great tooling, and I think that, I mean, looking at the job numbers, which is something I keep an eye on, we're seeing more and more Flutter jobs posted, at least here in the US. And I think, in India, it would be fairly parallel. But we're seeing more and more Flutter jobs posted. The problem is with big new development technologies in mobile, it's that there's just so much legacy content out there that's written either in traditional hybrid or traditional proprietary technologies that something like Flutter comes along. You've got to have people start adopting it, and then the job curve comes years later. Big fan of Flutter, though. I'd recommend that if you're going to spend time learning a new technology, that Flutter be pretty high on your list.
Great, Mark. Okay, this question seems interesting. According to you, is 2021 the year when we will see an increase in progressive web applications, that work in low Wi-Fi range or no Wi-Fi range? Do you think 2021 is a year?
I mean, it's funny. Here in the US, right, I mean, we take for granted that, unfortunately, that everyone has high-speed, constant-on connections. But, in a lot of parts of the world, and even parts of the US, that's not true, and that can't be taken for granted. I don't see, unfortunately, though, I mean, I just think there's a bias towards full fidelity applications, I'm not seeing a big increase in the call for um, for non-full fidelity apps. I think it would be great if it happens. I don't think 2021 is the year that it's going to happen, because I think developers and vendors are too apt to push the latest and greatest technology versus for a more accessible design in places where internet access and speed isn't taken for granted. So unfortunately, I would hope for it, but I don't see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think I'll move on to the next question. The next question is a very basic one. V. Srinath asks this question, and he says, according to you, what is the best source to learn JavaScript? Online. JavaScript is very, very important these days, right? And
Yes.
what according to you is the best source?
Well, according to me, it's learning from me. But if you are someone without resources to pay for a program, so let me break it into two categories. If you're going to pay for a program, I would look at something along the lines of lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning, and I should be full. I should tell you, I am a LinkedIn Learning instructor. So, but I think LinkedIn Learning has a lot of really good low-level starting JavaScript classes. It is relatively expensive for people in developing countries. It's I think $25 a month. I don't know if the pricing differs in India. So if you're going to pay for something, I'd go for LinkedIn Learning. If you're going to go the free route, I would just search Udemy. There's dozens of free courses, and some of them are absolutely terrible, but some of them are pretty good. And on Udemy, there's a lot of free courses for learning JavaScript. I'd also look at w3schools.com. But I think learning JavaScript is the right inclination for someone who's getting started, because JavaScript right now is the most important language out there, and it is the most hired for language out there. Lots and lots of JavaScript jobs, and the language is becoming more powerful as we see JavaScript now used for out for traditional web apps, but as I was showing you until my mouse died, mobile apps, and then also now with Node.js seeing it on the server side. JavaScript's here to stay. Another good resource is Free Code Camp. Has got some good JavaScript courses. So there's a lot of free resources out there. The problem is with free is just that people don't complete because they're not invested. But if you're invested and want to learn, there's loads of free resources. So start with Udemy, freecodecamp.org. If you want to pay for something, I think lynda.com, or also known as linkedinlearning.com, have really, really good courses, including mine.
Okay. Great. I think, okay, Mark, this question comes from somebody who, is involved in, or I think trying to build a career in mobile testing. So this question says, while performing end-to-end mobile testing, what according to you are, major considerations that one should sort of have in mind?
I think there's two answers here, right? One is, just good testing practice, starting out with unit tests and making sure that, you code with testing in mind. That's the first. And the second is, understanding the unique environments that your app is going to be running. I think, if you're using something like geolocation, you need to actually test your app under real world conditions and take it out of the lab. I also think it's important to test for the idiosyncrasies of different devices, especially in the Android world, where devices are so divergent in processor power, screen, etc., that you've got to test across a wide array of hardware to make sure that your app works. But I don't think testing mobile apps from just a strict development point of view is really any different than testing anything else. Good unit testing, good testing plan, and having good QA, takes care of 99% of your problems. But I also think it's important to field test mobile apps where you're using elements like geolocation, Bluetooth, or near field communication, elements of the apps that are not part of your standard development environment. So, the three things I would say is, good development practices when it comes to testing in the field for mobile devices that require the use of mobile features that don't exist in your development environment, like Bluetooth, near field communication, et cetera, and finally testing across the wide array of devices. I mean, there's no secrets here. It's pretty straightforward to do good, strong testing, but it does take some effort and a little creativity to make sure that your app's going to work under all the conditions in which it's going to be used.
Okay. I think there's a follow-up question to this question, and that says, can you list some of the testing tools when it comes to iPhone and iPad testing that you've used in the past, and some that you prefer over others?
I'm not really up to date on what the best current tooling is, unfortunately. I have retired from everyday development and now do strictly instructional. So I wouldn't be the best person to answer, what the best, tooling is. I mean for JavaScript, I use JUnit, but I think everybody does, for JavaScript unit tests. But beyond the field testing and those type of tooling, unfortunately, I'm just not up to date on that. I apologize.
No issue. Okay. This question seems interesting as well. How can sensitive data like contacts or access to camera or other sensors be secured fully in the world of mobile applications?
Secured fully. I don't think anything is secured fully. I think that's a standard that's just impossible to meet. But the devices have inherent security that protects elements like contacts. As a developer, all we can do is follow the best practices. I will say, sometimes I see things on both platforms. I'll be Android specific here, where, for example, apps are getting permissions and asking for permissions for things that seem irrelevant to the application itself. So I always question that type of thing. I think, but we have such poor user education, people just click through the permissions that an app asks for, not really reading what they are. I'm not entirely sure, what we can do to better secure the information that's now inherent in the operating systems, which have done a pretty good job. I don't know any vulnerabilities that would give access to the contacts, as an example. The problem is, though, that users willingly give permission for that information to be accessed without really thinking about it or looking at it. I'll give you an example. I installed a tennis game on my iPhone that wanted access to my contacts and to the telephone, and I couldn't think of a single reason why it would. I denied access to both, and the game still works. I think it's more of a user education problem, because the operating system inherently is pretty secure and denies access to elements that the application doesn't need. The problem is the user then gives permission to access those things. So it's a difficult question, and I don't know that there's a single good answer. And to be blunt, security is also not my expertise. So I think there's other people might give you a different answer, but that's mine.
All right. Okay. So I think, Mark, this next question, I'll try to reframe the question. I think there's a little bit of ambiguity here, but okay. So the question says, while building applications, you still need backend technology most of the time, right? So if you need fast access to data, what do you do in that kind of scenario, Mark?
If you need fast access to data, so I guess they're asking, like, what is the best way to provide fast access to data through a light mobile platform? Yeah, look, a lot of mobile apps require a back end. Many don't. Aside from the API service, the BART app that you guys have access to, there's no back end to that app. There's no PHP or Node. There is an API service that it's accessing. And I think that's where the answer is, is an API-based architecture is going to provide the best and fastest access to the data needed by the app, especially if you're in control of both sides. You can optimize your API on the back end to provide only the data that's needed by the app in a flat file text format that's fast. One thing, if you're talking about speed, you can do is make sure you're using JSON instead of XML. But with the flat file text formats that we're using to exchange data between APIs and apps in the mobile architecture, it is pretty fast. We're sending fast flat file data. And any serious querying or processing still usually is done on the server side. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's the answer is to actually do the heavy level of processing on the server side, send back lightweight text that only has the data that needs to be parsed in order for the view on the app itself. Most apps basically do some form of collecting API data, parsing it, and displaying it. So, we're never going to get rid of the server side, and most mobile devices aren't really designed for manipulating heavy amounts of data. So if the person who asked the question is frustrated by having to work both server side and client side on mobile apps, that's not something that's going away anytime soon.
All right. Okay. Got it, Mark. All right. So I think one more question, which is a very basic one, is that what is there one piece of advice to somebody who's starting out as a mobile developer, and to somebody who is starting out as a cross-platform mobile application developer? Who has a little bit of
So my advice to anyone who's starting out as a developer is focus on primary fundamental skills and learn those well before adding on libraries. In an era in the US, and I know this is common where you guys are too, of boot camp education, where a lot of people are learning in rapid environments instead of the traditional kind of college route. It's extremely difficult to learn everything you need to learn, but I would rather see, as the boot camps focus on high level libraries, I'd rather see a focus on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and learning the vanilla versions of those as well as you possibly can. Because with strong vanilla JavaScript skills, you can learn React, you can learn any library that's out there. But the problem I see is as soon as people run into something that the library doesn't do exactly what they need, they don't have the foundational JavaScript skills to solve the problem. I can do anything in vanilla JavaScript that can be done with jQuery or React. It may take more time because these libraries are a convenience, but I really think it's important for people who are new to the industry today to learn those fundamentals, because there's so much pressure to jump right into React before someone's fundamental JavaScript skills are strong, that it really is costly. And when I see people fail at their first job, the reason that they fail is lack of fundamental skills. So focus more on getting, if you can't parse, for example, JSON or XML stored in the DOM with vanilla JavaScript, you're not ready to do it using React. If you don't know if you don't know 4 ways to, using vanilla JavaScript, access HTML DOM elements, get element by ID, get element by tag name, etc. If you don't know how to use all of those, you're not ready to do it in a library, because a library simply abstracts away those basic functions. So again, just learn those basics as well as you possibly can, and then go on and layer the libraries on top. Don't succumb to the pressure to learn the libraries right away, because the libraries are so powerful and do so much of the work for you. And I apologize again for my demo going awry here. I have no mouse control, which is very bizarre. I am using the new Mac Mini, the new M Max, and maybe that's part of the problem. But I apologize for that. I wish I had a way of fixing that, but right now I can only manipulate with my keyboard, which doesn't seem to be working too well.
I think if Mark, we have some really great questions lined up. Should we keep keep up with the Q&A, or would you like to take the presentation?
No, I mean, because I can't get through, like I can't switch windows right now,
Okay, got it.
and so let's keep going with the questions because the questions are great.
Okay. I think the next question that we have is, does J2ME have any strengths as compared to Android?
I don't see J2ME getting implemented all that often. I mean, Android is. I guess I'm not fully grasping the question. 'Cause I mean,
Yeah,
J2ME is Java. Android development can be done in Java. But I don't know J2ME well enough to know the specifics of J2ME development. But I also don't see it being used that often. So I'm gonna say I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. So I think I'm not sure if I'm able to comprehend this question correctly, but if Mark, you could make sense out of it. It says, can
Sure.
one person build an app with HTML, CSS, JavaScript that can be used on a mobile device and can also be used offline?
Yes. Um, Obviously, you can't have any online dependencies, but absolutely. There are a couple of offline libraries and also one of the HTML5 native APIs, which his name is escaping me, but is available with Cordova or any of the other wrappers for HTML, JavaScript based mobile apps, does have an offline API. So, yeah, as long as you're not dependent on anything connection for anything, there's no reason why you couldn't build an offline app using the hybrid stack. Absolutely, you certainly could do that. Yes.
Okay, so this next question says, to what extent can we define separately user context and user model?
Read that one for me again.
Okay, so the question says, to what extent can we define separately user context and user model?
I'm not sure. I could be wrong here, but when I think of user context, I think of current user state being passed from page to page or part of the application to another part of the application, and the model just being that being a kind of a subset of the model. I'm not sure. My understanding is the two are entirely separate. I'm not sure I could delineate between the two because I think there's so much overlap. I'm not really sure what they're trying to ask there. Sorry.
Okay, I think the next question is, I think this also uses some sort of jargons. It says, how can we develop a mobile sense within the design and engineering of enterprise mobile solutions?
That's a great question. um, so I think if first off is if you're trying to develop a good sense of it starts with empathy and understanding what the user's problem is in the context that the user will be using the app in, and taking time to really analyze how other apps solve that problem. I'm not a designer. I'm a developer, but everything I've seen about the design process starts with the user and understanding that user really, really well, like that user is your best friend. So one of the things in the process that I've been involved in involved building a user avatar, a representation of who the user is, and then building the app around that user's needs and understanding when and where the user is going to be using the application. So I just think it starts with really understanding the user base, and then also understanding how the user uses the app. I mean, that's my best answer for that. Sorry. Any more questions?
Okay, so this one is interesting. For somebody who just started his, business, what's the most important thing that, what's the one advice that you'd give to that person uh, in order to build his own, app development team?
It's very competitive out there for people who are doing individual app development. Um, so, I mean, a couple pieces of advice because I've been in this position. The first is to build a strong portfolio of the work that you're capable of that demonstrates what you can do, while at the same time being really cognizant of understanding what you don't know and what isn't really in your wheelhouse. I think more than anything, clients want honesty from a developer and want to feel like they understand what exactly this developer can do and what's not within their capabilities. And when projects go wrong, it's a lot of times because the developer said they could do something, assuming they would figure it out, that wasn't within their skill set. So I think if your portfolio demonstrates what is within your skill set, then you're going to find that you're going to get clients who want those types of applications. The second thing I would say is if you're starting your own business is, realize that because you're a developer, um, and your skill set lies within building apps, doesn't necessarily mean you have or you're good at the other skills that are required to build a business. There's a book called The E Myth that I think is 25 years old now, but it discussed the idea that in big companies, the best programmer gets promoted to become the manager or the lead or the senior. And it's not because they have any particular skill that's suited to that. The skills of running a business are very different than the skills of writing a mobile app. So you may even consider partnering with someone who's got a product marketing or business background to help you build the business and do some of the things that aren't really your strength or things that you haven't learned to do yet. So, those would be my two pieces of advice. Be honest with your portfolio about what you can do and what you can't. And secondly, understand that running a business is a completely separate skill set from developing code, and be very cognizant of that as you make business decisions and rely on others where you can to help to help you make decisions that are strong in areas where you may not have yet built skill.
Great. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions. So this question
Sure.
comes from Sujal, and he asks that he says that I'm doing native app development since the last 12 years, and since 3 years, running my own service-based app development company. So should I start Flutter as well as native? Will I get more opportunities, more business this way?
I mean, native isn't going away. So, I mean, if you want to start Flutter or straight HTML based, there are certainly opportunities that you would not have access to now. Um, Whether or not that's a good business decision for you, I wouldn't be in a position to say. I do think that, and the numbers show, right, that hybrid app development is increasingly being adopted, an increasingly important skill. But I think that one of the things that I've noticed is where it's being adopted is certainly places where people are frustrated by having to maintain the parallel tracks on Android and iOS. I'll give you an example. I worked with a real estate company here in the US that put all their listings on an app, all their real estate listings, an app, and they had to build their Android app and their iOS app. And it was very, very frustrating because they had to maintain two separate teams working in parallel. That's typical of the type of organization that moves to hybrid. I don't know if people who hire independent developers who develop apps necessarily care about hybrid, or even understand the implementations. So I would say, learn Flutter and or HTML stack, whatever you want to learn, if you think you'll better serve your clients by having that in your toolbox as something to offer. But if most people are just coming to you with, I want an iOS app, or I want an Android app, or whatever it is you do, I don't see that being a tremendous addition to your business. So, I think the answer is will you serve your clients better by learning it? The good news is I don't think the learning curve for Flutter is the same as the learning curve for iOS or Android native. I think if you're already doing native development, you can pick up the fundamentals of Flutter in a weekend. And Google's training in developer.android for Flutter is really, really good. I learned the fundamentals of Flutter just by going through their course and was able to build a couple of basic apps just after having gone through the tutorial and understanding how coding works. So it's not a huge lift if you want to learn it. I don't know for a fact, though, that it'll improve your business and that your time isn't better spent elsewhere.
All right, great. So I think we've taken most of the questions. We'll take one more question. This question seems interesting. It says, what is the most comprehensive framework, according to you, Mark, used as a format in reporting development process of smartphone app to, sort of promote healthy behavior?
To promote what?
To promote healthy behavior, in the marketplace. According to you, what is the most comprehensive framework that can be used?
To promote healthy, like health, you're talking about like healthy, like eating right and running, or are you talking about like healthy development behaviors?
Yeah, healthy development behavior, absolutely.
Okay. So I was going to say Apple's Health Suite and health APIs are unbelievable. They're really, really good. So, I think each ecosystem, whether it's the Android ecosystem, whether it's the iOS ecosystem, has its own way of enforcing and promoting healthy development behavior. The more formalized the system, the better. So I would say, probably because of its use of Java, Android probably does the best job of enforcing healthy and correct development, followed by iOS. As you know, one of the things about web development is if you're using that stack to create mobile, was really designed to favor the user and is very forgiving of errant code. Like you can have errant JavaScript code, for example, you don't have line terminators, or you have syntax errors in the code, and it still runs. That's not necessarily the case with Java. It won't compile. So I think that if you're looking to enforce good development hygiene, Android's the first place to look after iOS, although I still think Swift is kind of messy in some implementations. But HTML is still kind of the Wild West when it comes to that.
All right. Okay. So Mark, now that it's almost 5, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to share with the audience before we sort of bring an end?
So I feel badly, and I can't even display my information. But what I will do is just put up here again my email address. Let's see if I can find a place where I can put it here. Because I still have no mouse. There we go. I'm Mark at frameworktv.com. If you want any of the resources from today, feel free to email me. I was just going to display that last slide again, but I'm just not in a place where I can. So if you email me, if you want any of the resources, either the PDF with the instructions for the app code, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. I apologize. And then also, if you want to go to my website at frameworktv.com, there's a sign up there where you can get free training content, etc., accessed on a regular basis. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. It's all available to you free with your email there. So those are the two things. The other thing I would say is, thank you guys for what you do. The developers are the new rock stars of industry, and it really is always an honor to be able to chat with a group of developers and learn a little about them. But I mean, I think the best is yet to come. We're just at the beginning of this, and I think some of the things that are on the horizon will be very, very exciting. And I hope you guys continue to passionately do what you do. We need good developers, and I'm glad you guys were able to come late on a Friday afternoon. I hope everyone has a good weekend, and thank you, Vibor, again for the invitation. Hopefully, if we were to do this again, we'll have the my mouse won't die and our demo will work a little bit better.
Absolutely. So Mark, I'll also, in the chat box, I'll share your email ID and also your YouTube channel in
Wonderful.
Just a second, and I'll just share it with all the attendees. Okay, yeah, I got it. So I think so Mark, we'll sort of wrap it up now. I think it has been a wonderful experience, and we'll have to bring an hour to the wonderful insights. We had some really great questions that came up, some really great high level questions that came up from the audience. And thank you so much, Mark, for collaborating with us, as well as to all the attendees. Thank you guys for staying with us for this 1 hour. And guys, there's a small survey towards the end of the webinar. So if you'd like to give us your feedback, so that, we can make necessary improvements in the future, please do that. All right. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much for the collaboration.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great weekend, guys.